we do have our first guest.
Hello.
Hello.
What's up, Field?
What's happening, gentlemen? How we doing?
Mr. Field Yates.
What's going on? How are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm bothering the DNVR airwaves all sorts of times today.
I know.
I'm happy about it, though.
You're on CHGO. You know, you'll be on the Philly one eventually.
Totally. Is this Phoenix right next to us?
Yes, it is.
I don't know if you got. I mean, I'm sure the people that are watching on camera right now can't see this, but we are on this right here. And she can probably confirm. This is like elite hair all across the set right now, including Trevor Sikkema over there. He's got terrific lettuce. I mean, that's one of the criteria to join the show. You got to have good hair, I think.
That is true.
You're the leader in the clubhouse, Field.
Oh, you know what? Tell that to Trevor, because he might take umbrage with that.
I'm taking umbrage with that.
I know. I was going to say, we got some strong contenders up there.
I just got a comment from some lady over there on my hair.
Wow, well done, dude.
Tell that lady to rethink her stance.
Oh, wow.
All right, I'm just kidding.
Hold on, I got a tweet for you to read to you, Field.
Okay. Oh, is it like one of those mean tweets about someone saying something?
No.
No, okay, it's a very nice tweet.
Just tell me if this rings a bell at all. My 2025 NFL mock draft. 1.
Oh, yeah.
Athlete Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
2. Quarterback Shedeur Sanders.
It does ring a bell. That was during the TCU game.
It was.
Yeah, it was. I remember it well, and I'm not sure my stance has changed that much. I probably should put Shedeur first because quarterbacks tend to go at the top of the draft. But, I mean, what a time right now. I understand, I am prepared for the people that are going to tell me, last place in the Pac-12. But, I mean, when was the last time Colorado had this much attention on the football program? Probably, maybe never?
Yeah, I mean
maybe since national championship seasons, Cordell Stewart era,
even then, it was a different time,
right? Yeah, totally. And those two are unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about legitimately, probably the best quarterback in the country going into the next season, and things can change, and guys can rise and guys can fall. But Shedeur, unbelievably impressive, and then Travis Hunter, I think has a real chance to be When was the last time we had a guy like him enter the NFL? I don't know, Charles Woodson,
Deion Sanders,
maybe Deion, right? I mean, I don't know what he'll end up doing, if he'll decide to plant his flag on one side of the ball or the other. Or if we'll just say that I can do both. I mean, just the physical conditioning is actually kind of ridiculous. I think it was 112 plays in that TCU game, which there are going to be first-round picks that play 65, 70% of the snaps for their team, which is 50 plays per game. Yeah. He played basically 2+ games in one game, and that was not all that uncommon for him. Obviously, the injury at some point impacted things, but he's fascinating, and he's an absolute stud. There are a few players that I've had a lot of fun with this year in preparing for the upcoming draft where you kind of use them as measuring stick players. I talk about this all the time with Marvin Harrison Jr. in the Big Ten because there are several Big Ten cornerbacks that might end up being drafted this year. And I'm talking about the past version of Big Ten, not the new version of the Big Ten, because Penn State's got 2 really good corners. They've got Michigan obviously has got all kinds of defensive players, including a couple corners. Iowa's got Cooper DeJean, all these corners that are going to end up being drafted. And what you do is you go back and you track how they played against Marvin Harrison Jr. And Travis Hunter's the same way. Josh Newton, the corner from TCU, who mostly covered him during that game, is going to be probably a top 100 pick this year. Yeah. Guys put a lot of football at a high level. And Travis makes it look a lot easier than it should. Against a guy who's got a real chance to be playing on Sundays as a starter this year. It's pretty impressive. And obviously, a lot of work ahead, and I know they got to shore up the trenches. It sounds like it was another busy off season, more so on the transfer portal than it was in the recruiting class. But I don't know, man. It's going to take time. Deion's going to galvanize people, and it's going to probably bother some people because he's got swag and things that people are envious of. But I don't know. I think if I were a Buffs fan, I'd still be pretty fired up right now.
Yeah, we are. As it relates to Travis, what do you think? Do you think you just talked about how he did a great job being covered by a top 100 or a top 100 player? At the same time, he's locking down guys on the other side as wide receivers. Do you think he goes into the NFL as both, or do you think that the NFL is going to want to put him in a category?
I think he goes in the NFL as both.
He's
too valuable, obviously, to not play both for Colorado next year. There might be one thing about Prime that I think is cool, Coach Prime, is that he wants to win. They all do, right? He strikes me, and you guys could tell me I'm an idiot, and this is incorrect, of having some sensibility about what's best for the guys in the long term as well. And while I don't think that he would play Travis 112 snaps a game if he felt like it was potentially going to hurt him, he may also have some influence on that decision and say, something? At the end of the day, while I could do both, at that time, it was best for me to be, the best cornerback on the planet.
Yeah.
And maybe Dion, maybe his feeling was he was a better corner than he was wide receiver. Maybe that was the biggest influence on it. That might be the calculation that Travis has to make, is that maybe this year, and as I'm showcasing myself, maybe the vast majority of my resources and effort, because on top of playing, like, you got to, like, prepare, you got to be in the film room, right? Like, if he's at the wide receiver meetings, it means he's missing out on the cornerback meetings and vice versa, right? Maybe Prime is saying, hey, you know what? I think you're a wide receiver. I think you are the next great wide receiver in the NFL. And while we'll use you at cornerback, like, we're going to make sure that this year we want you on every Biletnikoff list. We want you to be a first-team All-American wide receiver. But I think, like, optionality is not a bad thing, and I don't think it's going to hurt his value any. I mean, again, it's early in the process, but Shedeur, Travis, there are probably a couple others that are, like, on that short list going into the year, but top 10 pick feels like the absolute floor for those guys. Yep. And the ceiling, obviously, would be legitimately 1-2.
For sure.
Maybe 3 for Travis if there's another quarterback that really makes us push. But 1-2 feels like it's in play.
I've been saying kind of recently with Travis at corner, I think there's a chance that NFL teams see his ability at corner as more rare. Just because there's so many wide receivers, and there's a lot of good wide receivers.
There are.
You don't see a lot of corners in college who are coming off of zone or man coverage and jumping another route, and like the pick he had.
That
against
interception
TCU.
at the end zone was ridiculous.
And he did it 2 more times against UCLA.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I think the counterpoint that I would make would just be that while there are a lot more top wide receivers than there are top cornerbacks, the marketplace has not caught up yet for corners like it has wide receivers, right? Mm-hmm. Like. At the top of the heap is Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. I think Tyreek's at $30 million a year. Devontae is at like 28.5, whereas the top cornerbacks are more like closer to like 20 to 22 range. Mm-hmm. So you may, and I get it. Like let's get to the NFL before we start worrying about second contracts. But guys, like, players are mindful of those long-term deals. Freaking a few years ago, DeAndre Ayton, who's of course former big topic of Phoenix podcast, I'm sure, was talking about how, like, his goal was to make it a second contract in the NBA.
Yeah.
Yep. Right? And because the minute he's in NBA is fully guaranteed, he's got $120 million. It's going nowhere, whether he's a 30-point per game player or a 3-point per game player. So while it is in some ways silly to be talking about, like, the second contract this early, in some ways you're like, I mean, look at now. I think one of the big reasons why we're seeing so many great wide receivers is parents are saying, why would I play hopefully not all parents are like this, but some parents are like, why would I make my kid play running back?
Yeah.
Because if he's any good, if you're like a star 15-year-old running back at your school, your parents may say, yeah, he's a running back for now, but he's a wide receiver at college.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because how many running backs are getting paid? The answer is very few anymore. Very few.
And then you have guys like Debo, who obviously playing this game, who have just kind of become slash players of their own.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, you can use me at running back, but when it comes time to talk turkey for our contract, I'm a wide receiver. Make that very clear, right? He got a wide receiver contract much more than he did a running back contract after a season in which he led the NFL in yards per carry. Mm-hmm. I think he scored on 20.2% of his carries the year prior to his extension, which is just an astronomical number, like completely absurd. But that's part of the reason why he now makes, God, these deals all blend together now, but like, $20 million a year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, we talk about this all the time with Travis, but as much as a team may want to put him in a category and put him in a box, you're going to have a ANSI player on your hands. I think one of the main reasons why he plays so much is because he demands. He's just like, I gotta play. Get me out there.
He's competitive.
He would play every snap if they let him.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing that will work in his favor in the NFL. There's a whole other side of the conversation besides what you see on the film. It's the character, it's the football desire, it's the willingness, it's the ability to kind of distinguish yourself from a crowded field. I talk about this all the time now in the draft. Is that what's going to happen is that, like, in this year's class, you're going to see the cream of the crop, right? They're going to rise up, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. is not a top 5 pick because he came out this year. He's a top 5 pick because he's Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a top 5 pick, right? You get to this category of guys that are like, any given year, first-round picks. Then you get through another category of guys that, like, have a good chance to be a first-round pick this year, would probably be a first-round pick in a lot of years. They also might be a second-round pick in other years. Then you get to this big, fat gap of guys. And it's guys that might be third-round picks this year, they might be fifth-round picks this year, but the difference between a third-round pick and a fifth-round pick might be as simple as, hey, the character's better here, the determination's better there, the medical's better here, the interviews we had were better there. Like, that's the difference maker. And so for Travis, like, we know the football stuff is good, but by all accounts, and you guys would have a much better account than I do, it seems like the player, the person and the player kind of stand on equal footing here.
Amen.
Definitely. And then just with Shedeur, what stood out? I mean, you tweeted that during the TCU game. It's the first game of the season. What stood out to you about him?
There's this. So when you're the son of Deion Sanders, there's this belief that like you're probably an A+ athlete, right?
Yep.
I don't think Shedeur. I don't know. I don't think he's like A++. I think he's really solid athlete. But what people are going to misinterpret is that he is this dual threat quarterback. Like, I think he can run. I thought he was the best pocket passer in college football this past year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
when there was a pocket.
When there was, yes, obviously that was. When he had time to throw, I thought he was the best pure passer in the whole country. And I'm talking, you lumped Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels in that conversation too. His accuracy is filthy. I mean, ball placement's off the charts. The ability to like maneuver the pocket when there was one a little bit, buy a little bit of extra time. He's obviously a very, very good athlete. I'm just saying, like, I don't know if he's a 4.4 guy, if he's more like a 4.55, something like that, right? But there's going to be a misconception. Oh, he's Deion Sanders' son. He's going to have to be this dual threat quarterback. He's going to absolutely slice and dice you from the pocket. The anticipation is off the charts. The ability to, accuracy is measured in a lot of different ways in football, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of the league. We have completion percentage, which I think is important, but not the whole story. Some of it is like the difficulty of throws that you're making and attempting. Some of it also is that like the difference between a big gain and a 7-yard catch is ball placement, right?
Yep.
If you're a wide receiver that's got a step on a slant and the ball's out in front of you, it might be a 25-yard gain. If the ball's on your back hip, if the ball's right in the numbers, if the ball is errantly thrown, it's a 7-yard gain, right? Or it's an incomplete pass. So I thought that Shedeur really stood out in terms of his ball placement and being, again, I thought the most polished, best pure pocket passer in the country last year.
And we talked about it with him when he was coming from Jackson State to Colorado. And people are like, is this going to translate? Is this going to translate? And it's like...
That travels. That one travels.
That's what I was going to say. Is if you putting the ball wherever you want, it doesn't matter who you're playing against.
No doubt. That one will travel. I'm not too worried about that one. So we are still... Like, I've still got a lot of work to do on this current quarterback class. But I do rest a little bit easier thinking about 2025, knowing that, it ain't going to be hard for me to figure out who the best quarterback, at least in my draft rankings, is going into the season. Obviously he's got to prove it. He's got to do it again, and other quarterbacks will have a chance to make their mark. There certainly are some talented quarterbacks in next year's class. I'm not dismissing those by any stretch, but much like Caleb Williams was QB1, it was his sort of role to lose. Same thing for Shedeur going into next year.
Kind of a bigger question, but just since you've been covering the draft and all this stuff, I'm just curious about your general opinion of where college football is headed, really, what do you think is the big fix to kind of get this all settled down?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a great question. I think we could do a whole show on this, right? I think that it's important for people to understand that like multiple things can be true at once, and so the fact that players are now compensated for their name, image, and likeness is a massive win, right? I mean, it was an injustice for however many years that guys were making millions for these schools and seeing zero out of it, right? It also, because of that, multiplied by the transfer rule, has totally changed the game. I mean, I was at the Senior Bowl this past week and talking about a couple of programs that maybe made some changes this offseason on the coaching staff or otherwise, and I was talking to a couple of my colleagues who are big college football reporters or analysts, and I was just sort of going through the top 10 and like sizing things up. And we were talking about teams that could be great this upcoming year. They're like, Field, here's the problem, is that I have my list right now. We haven't even hit the spring transfer portal yet.
Yep.
He's like, we got another 30-day portal where, I'm just pick a random team, right? Like Ohio State's apparently, they've seemingly added every player in the transfer portal possible, but like they could keep going. Or Ohio State's got 4 quarterbacks who are all like notable in their own right, might lose one of them. I don't know that, obviously.
Yeah.
So they could lose one of those guys. So the game's changed so much, and there's a part of me that's nostalgic and misses like the rivalry aspect of it. That to me is a fair thing to say. I'm happy for these players that they are compensated. I do wonder though, and I don't have a solution yet, so I don't like the people that say like you must change this without offering some sort of solution. But I do wonder if there is an eventual need for change to legislate not players being paid, but legislate the idea that this has basically become NFL free agency 12 months a year. Again, maybe that's me being simple-minded, but as a fan, and I'm just a fan of college football other than when I'm studying these guys for the draft, it's just kind of a bummer when it just feels like what we're doing is we're just eventually, like the ball is just rolling down the hill, and at the bottom of that hill is like 20 teams in one conference that just play for a championship every year.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And you kind of mentioned, like, the tradition and the rivalries and a lot of that stuff. Like, sometimes it's like a hard-nosed linebacker from one school who's there his fourth year, and he's, like, talking so much shit about the rival because, he's been in it.
Yeah.
A lot of that feels like it's being kind of lost in the shuffle.
So my mom is from Columbus, Ohio. My dad's from Hawaii, so I did not grow up with parents that came from big professional sports states.
Yeah.
Or professional sports cities, I should say specifically. But my youth, people are asking me, I was an Ohio State fan. That was my first team that I loved. And that includes, like, I used to have my grandpa used to take me to a game a year, and I'll never forget my first experience at Ohio State, Michigan, and how not only did I go to the game, but, like, I spent the full week out there. And, like, my grandpa, and this is, again, a different generation. I'm 36, so it's not like not like this was 5 years ago, but, 25 years ago, whatever it was. Like, we went out there on, like, Wednesday or Thursday. Friday morning, like, we went to the diner where he went every Friday morning with the same group of people. Yeah. The radio was on. We're all sitting there listening to local radio, talking about the game ahead. Everybody has their same meal, right? Friday afternoon, you go to the pep rally, right? My grandpa used to send me the Buckeye, whatever, bulletin or something, right? Yeah. I had all the players who were being recruited, little write-ups on the newspaper about these guys. I get it. We're in a much different world than that. But, like, that was the college football that I grew to love.
Yeah.
I still love college football. I mean, I spend as many hours on my couch on Saturdays as most people do. I'm just saying that, like, there was a sort of a different dynamic in play then that does not exist now that some people might long for.
Yeah.
For me, and we've talked about this on this show a lot, is the calendar just seems all out of whack with college football.
It is 365 days a year. I mean, again, just the idea that, like, it felt like it hit us hard this year because there were 3 coaches in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But you're like, all right, so the season's over in, like, November for some teams. Portal opens for players potentially if their coach gets fired.
Yep.
All right, then we have, like, National Signing Day or Commitment Day or whatever, and then it's like, all right, we got bowl games. All right, coach gets fired. More players hit the portal. And you're just like, man, like, it just never stops. Mm-hmm. And once those 3 jobs got filled, Alabama, Washington, and Michigan, it's like, all right, well, in the case of Washington, or, like, once Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama, now someone has to go to Washington, right? Now someone has to go to Arizona. Now someone has to go to San Jose State, right? It's like, the trickle-down effect is so substantial that the transfer portal basically exists in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. I guess it's slowed down now, but BC,
Boston College, yeah.
Friggin' Jeff Hafley leaves his job 4 days ago, whatever it was, and now they have 30 days to decide to leave.
And they're talking about Chip Kelly, like, going to the NFL all of a
sudden,
too.
Chip. It sounds like Chip could, potentially be in the mix for an NFL job. Maybe not. We'll see. But Boston College has to hire somebody. It sounds like Bill O'Brien might wind up getting that job. But still, like, if he does that, now Ohio State has to go back to the drawing board with a coordinator, right? So it's listen. I'm not trying to say that it's perfect or imperfect. It's always somewhere in between. But again, like, the college football that I think we grew up with, right, is probably closer to. Even if you're not an Oregon State fan, you're like, I want to watch that, or I want to watch Wazoo, Washington to the Apple Cup, or I want to watch whatever, is it Nebraska and Wisconsin playing for that hatchet or whatever, whoever it is that plays for that big axe, might be Minnesota, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Like, those games felt special and different, and they feel a little bit less special now.
All right, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, you guys, for having me join. Let's do it. All right,
I know you have family in Colorado, so if you're ever out there, hit us up. We'll have you down at the bar.
We'll love that.
We'll hang out.
That. I want to get out for a game.
Yes.
I've never been to my favorite stadium. I've never been to a game there. So
please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Most beautiful scene in sports.
Let us know when you come out.
Yes, sir.
Deal.
See you out there.
At my word.
Field Yates.
All right, gents.
Appreciate you, man.